This is Bill Brady, Ecclesia Framework, speaking to you today about climbing Mount Zion in terms of ages. Wanted to spend a little time doing that. We'll talk about ages in general first, starting with the age of enlightenment, where we get a sense of a higher purpose and a God. I have contact with people that are not yet born again, but they have a sense that they have a destiny, and they know that their life is a journey, a faith journey, and they actually even exercise faith for things like career and housing, but yet have not exercised faith to be born again. That's enlightenment. You know there's a God, you have a sense of a higher purpose, you may not even be talking in the sense of God, use other words for it, but you're not yet experiencing Jesus. That's enlightenment. First stage of progression. Second stage, church age. I would say this is the age that the New Testament was written at. And then the kingdom age. We noticed that Jesus and the apostles and they preached the kingdom of God. So they're preaching about the kingdom to people in the church age. In the kingdom, we started getting involved with not just a ministry in a church, but we start seeing our life as a destiny, and we have marketplace thinking. We realize there's layers of heaven and the kingdom of heaven. And we move away from church to making disciples and ruling as a king on our mountains, having gone through the progression from servant to bondservant to friend to Lord to king. Next age, ecclesia age, ecclesia age, having to do with operating out of scrolls and getting involved with benches of three. The courts are in this ecclesia age. Next age, order of Melchizedek, where we operate out of the four faces of God. We begin to move beyond spiritual warfare to seeing a positive heavenly blueprint and living as light beings. There's a whole lot involved with the order of Melchizedek. Next age, age of peace, so we can stop warring and can actually live out of our future selves. We can move along the timeline forward and back. And then the age of rest, ruling in the midst of chaos, the authority to show up, that we just show up and we're governing, so much less legislating and so on, and more governing. God the Father created and rested on the seventh day. And then the age of new beginnings, the eighth day, the day of creation. So the day of creating a new heaven. And once we've created a new heaven, then that new earth, that's a mirror image of that creation, a new heaven, is something that we bring into place to the age of Zion. Now, climbing the mountain, climbing Mount Zion. I would see that as something that begins with kingdom age, or at least is heading there. I suppose church age could be lords. Kingdom age is kings. Ecclesia is kings, where we begin to function on the bench. Order of Melchizedek. Age of peace. And then for me personally, I finally came to rest just before I sat down on the throne on top of Mount Zion. So age of rest. Now, I'm making it sound like it's a line, but it's not a line. It's more like you have this experience and you have that experience, and they're filling in pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. Some of the experiences you have are up near the top, while you're still having experiences down near the bottom. You are a king, let's say, and then you're still learning how to rule on your Lord mountains to get your life get healed, or finances to find financial needs being met in a greater way than you had previously. You may be ruling for your family. And so you may be having experiences at all kinds of different levels of ages. And what you're doing is putting the jigsaw puzzle picture together. And by the time you sit down on that throne, you've got a major part of that jigsaw puzzle put together. Probably not all of it. Another way to look at it is you get a glimpse of things up at the top. I remember being on Ascensions, and I got a glimpse of the age of peace, and I'm thinking, oh, I've entered the age of peace. I didn't feel a whole lot of peace at the time afterwards, but I've had this glimpse of the age of peace, and I've functioned a little bit out of it on this Ascension. And now the Ascension's over, and I'm realizing, I'm not really living in an age of peace. I just had a glimpse of it, and I functioned in a little bit of it. And I've seen some things actually beyond the throne there on top of Mount Zion, but I'm not living out of them. I've just had a glimpse of them. So there's this sense of getting to see things further up in the ages, but not actually living out of them. And then actually there may be a sense of living out of it, but not actually completely ruling. So let's take that throne on top of Mount Zion as an example. When I sat down on that throne, I wasn't ruling from that throne. I was just sitting there. I had been given the privilege of sitting there, but I had not yet been given the authority to rule. And same thing with any one of these other ages and steps up the mountain. It's glimpses and functioning of it, but not functioning in it on a regular basis, and then functioning a little more in it, and then finally functioning in it completely. And all of this is going on while you're getting, you're still maybe trying to rule your Lord mountains, and you're ruling for your family, and you're ruling for your job, and you're doing this and that, and yet here you are, a king that's had gone through one or two or three of the four stages of kingship, but not yet been crowned. And all this is going on in different time, all a glimpse here, a glimpse there, a function here, a function there. So it's not completely linear going up the mountain step by step. It's more a little here and a little there, and God's filling in the big picture piece by piece, and you're entirely dependent upon Him the entire process. He leads you here, He leads you there, He gives you this piece, He gives you that piece. He shows you this, He helps you to start ruling a little bit in this, and then He finally gets you to where you're ruling regularly in that particular age. So it's not completely linear by any means. It's more of this jigsaw puzzle that I just described. That was my experience. Now, in previous recordings, I've talked about men and women being different in the way we experience things. Now, I'm sure we have major things we experience together, but there's parts of this that we experience differently, and each of us experience things differently. And so on top of all that, there's the difference of personal journey. Not linear. It is a journey up and up because you are moving up, but you're not walking step by step along a path that is along a line from the bottom to the top. I just wanted to share that with you about ages as far as progressing up Mount Zion. Now, again, for me, I stepped into the age of rest at the point that I sat down on that throne. But I would not say that I experienced rest entirely. At a later point, I came to a greater sense of peace and a greater sense of rest, and to the place that I feel that I am resting all the time. Now, what does resting mean in the age of rest? God rested from his creation. And so rest for us means stop doing things on our own and coming to a place where we are working with the Lord entirely. It doesn't mean he gives you every step of it. You get to where you know what you're doing, and you can do it without having been told you do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. He just lets you do it because you learned step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and you know you're supposed to be doing this or that, and you do it. Not in the sense that he says get out of bed on the left side this morning. Next day he says get out of bed on the right side. It's nothing like that. Tie your shoes, put your left shoe on first today, your right shoe on first the next day. None of that kind of stuff. We are growing in our relationship with him. We're also growing up responsibility-wise, just like any child. They get taught lessons. Then you get up off the floor as a toddler. You first get up off the floor and stand up, and your parents are delighted with you, and you fall back down, and you fall back down one way or another, and maybe there's some crying involved, and somebody picks you up and gives you some comfort, and you get over crying, and then a little bit later you get to thinking, I want to stand up again, and you stand up. And after you stood up for a while and you've gotten good at standing up, you take a couple steps and fall over, and there's some crying involved, and somebody picks you up and comforts you, and then you are standing one day and you say to yourself, I don't remember any of this, neither do you, but I kind of think this is the way it works. I'd like to get from here to there. Let's try that. And you start walking, and you go quite a bit further, and you fall down again. Same thing with going up the mountain. It's a learned process. Life is a journey, on the job training. And that's the case of going up the mountain. So add this concept of on-the-job training in here, where you're growing in your relationship and responsibility. You don't need to be told what to do in every little detail. As you're climbing the mountain, you get better and better at doing things when you know that God led you, but he doesn't have to give you all the steps involved. And finally, then you sit down on that throne up on top. But it's also like you finally catch up at a later point where the age of rest becomes a much more deep kind of rest, and you are definitely doing things that you know you're supposed to be doing, and you've definitely completely stopped doing things that you were doing on your own. I'm not just talking about sin, I'm talking about doing your own thing. I don't know about you, but I've made many mistakes in life, done my own thing, and paid and learned the hard way. And some of those mistakes are ones that stay with you forever, and they become part of God's plan. And some of them are ones that you can move out of much quicker and leave behind, and it's in your past and doesn't come with you. I'm thinking of apartments that I have rented that I knew afterwards that was a really big mistake, and I spent a year and moved. In some cases, I paid the price and moved out right away. Actually, in one case, before I even moved in, lost my deposit, and I'm off and gone because I realized I was doing this all on my own. It wasn't something that God wanted for me. That's an easy way of illustrating the whole concept I'm using here. But in some cases, you really had no choice. You stay for the year, or maybe even longer, and maybe even you bought a house in the wrong place, and then you had to wait a bit to be able to get out of that. Sometimes you're able to move back immediately and step back, because if you go down the wrong path, the first thing to do is turn around and go back to where you got wrong on the path, and then get back on the path and keep on going. If you're able to do that and circumstances allow you to do that, you do it. And if you're not able to do that, you wait it out until you're able to get back to where you're supposed to be. And maybe even that place doesn't exist anymore, and you have to go to the place you're supposed to be now. It's too late to go back. So you understand all these things. This is all part of the up and up the mountain. So ages are involved, but it's not like from one age to the next age and the next age. It's more or less I've described here. Please continue to go up and up the mountain. Don't get stuck on it having to be a linear thing, step by step by step. The more relationship oriented you are, I suspect the less linear it's going to be. The more responsibility oriented you are, I suspect the more linear it's going to be. That's just my suspicion, not having dialogued this particular concept out with other folks, but that's my suspicion. So here's some general ideas about going up and up the mountain. The big thing is don't camp anywhere. Don't get stuck someplace and stay there. Keep on moving. Personally, I find that faith involves being right out on the edge. And once you've been that spot for a while, no longer is there that risky feeling of being out on the edge any longer. That's probably the time in which it's time to start moving again. I kind of picture it like, this is probably a comic book thing that I saw somewhere along the line. I think there was a comic book hero that actually made the ice that he moved along as he moved along. I picture it as a person up in heavenly places, and they're creating the ice in front of them as they ice skate along. They're creating ice as they ice skate along. There is nothing out there. It's just empty space, and you're creating ice as you ice skate along. You're right on the edge. And however, if the ice keeps on going and you stop and you are no longer on the edge, that's camping. I mean, there are times of rest and so on, but you don't want to stay someplace longer than you're meant to stay there. That would then be camping permanently or longer than you're supposed to. It's supposed to be a journey. The people of Israel were on a journey. They had the pillar of fire by night and the cloud by day. And when the cloud picked up during the day, they struck camp, put everything away, and took off on the journey. And when the cloud stopped, they stopped there, put the camp back up there and stayed there until the cloud took off again. Or if it was by night, it was the pillar of fire that moved. And they, at that point, the camping in that spot was over and done. They followed God to where he was taking them to, and then they set up camp again. That's the picture of us going up the mountain age by age. Not linearly, like I've explained before, but it's a journey. And when the pillar of fire starts moving, break camp and go. When the cloud starts moving, break camp and go. Don't stay where you are. Don't camp. It's meant to be a journey up and up. We go up and up Mount Zion to the top.